What's up everyone and welcome back. And I didn't think I'd ever be saying this, but Gladiator II is finally here, so without further ado, let's look at some footage.
I remember that day. I never forgot it. That a slave could take revenge against an
So
emperor.
Gladiator II is a 2024 release directed by Ridley Scott, and it stars Paul Mescal, Denzel Washington, Pedro Pascal, Connie Nielsen, Joseph Quinn, and Fred Hetchinger. It's a sequel to Scott's film from the year 2000, Gladiator, and it's set years after witnessing the death of the revered hero Maximus at the hands of his uncle. Lucius is forced to enter the Colosseum after his home is conquered by the tyrannical emperors who now lead Rome with an iron fist. With rage in his heart and the future of the empire at stake, Lucius must look to his past to find strength and honor to return the glory of Rome to its people. So we have another film from Ridley Scott, who's very late in his career at this point, and this time he's making a sequel to one of his most revered films of all time. He has kind of done this before. He made prequels to the Alien franchise with Prometheus and then Alien Covenant, and people were a little bit annoyed, I think, when this film was announced. But I do need to backpedal a little bit to say that Gladiator was kind of always meant to have a sequel. Now, that's not to say that it should. The original Gladiator is a great film and has a fantastic ending and it kind of closes the book on that story. But Scott always wanted to take the story further, and in the 2000s at some point he actually tapped Nick Cave to write a script for it, and it was written, but it never got off the ground. If you're at all interested, you can find details about that Nick Cave script, and it's wild. But now we have this sequel, and along with it we have some huge star power in the likes of Paul Mescal and Pedro Pascal, who are leading this film. And it's a bit uneven, but we'll go through all of it. To speak a little bit on the man himself, Ridley Scott, I'm personally a very big fan, but mainly of his earlier work. His film Blade Runner is probably my favorite film of all time. I love Alien, I love stuff that he's done throughout his career. I do love the original Gladiator as well, but I would be lying if I said that he's someone who seems to have lost the magic just a little bit. And it seems to be in the scripts that he's choosing to direct and not so much his directorial style. But there are things about that that I have seen in a couple of his recent films that I haven't really been enjoying, and we're going to go through them. But I actually want to give some background on what makes the original film Gladiator so special, not just as a film, but also to me as a person. I grew up, like many young boys, and apparently many men now, really liking the history surrounding the Roman Empire, finding it very cool, very fascinating, and the idea of gladiators as well. But the real connection I kind of have to that film is the fact that that original film was mostly filmed in Malta, where I was raised, where all my family are. And when I was really young, probably about 7 or 8 years old, we actually went on a school outing to the set that was left over from Gladiator, and I got to see it up close, and that just gave me a much deeper love for that film. It's good to see that the sequel did return to Malta for a lot of its production, and being a local, I can see all the Maltese bits in there, and it's actually really nice to see. But if we come back to Ridley Scott, I think he's someone who's always had this real talent for making something seem really big when it might not be. In the original Gladiator, they were obviously working with a lot less CGI back then, but the opening battle is one of the best battles I could probably see put to film, and the way he makes it so claustrophobic but also seem so big is a really impressive thing for a filmmaker to do. And sadly, it seems like it's something he's kind of losing with the advancement of technology and using computer-generated images. If we look back at his most recent film before Gladiator II with Napoleon, that film was filled with pretty obvious CGI. Some of it looked a little bit unfinished as well, and it's almost no different here. The CGI for the most part is good, but he's doing these huge battles where nothing feels real. There's no real fire for most of the time. There's a big ship battle very early on in this film, and I don't think any of the ships are real in that, apart from the ones they use, I guess, really close up for sets, and really detracts from things feeling immersive and believable. I mentioned that opening battle in the original Gladiator film, where you could feel the mud and the blood through the screen with how well that was done. But then also, with that being said, there are some set pieces in this film which are actually really impressive. One I particularly enjoyed, for anyone that has seen the trailer and we're looking at footage now as well, it's the ship battle inside the Colosseum. And a lot of history heads got kind of annoyed about this one because they're like, oh, how did they fill the Colosseum and have naval battles? They actually did. They actually did apparently do that. I don't know about the sharks. I don't think the sharks were actually there back then, but who can really say? But that's actually a really impressive set piece in this film. And I have to say, in comparison to something like Napoleon, the action is overall a lot better here, especially the close quarters stuff and people fighting. It is very bloody. He hasn't shied away from that, which is really good because this is a film called Gladiator. Limbs are going to go missing, you know. But as I was watching, I actually couldn't quite help but feel that, and it seems to be a thing throughout Hollywood, it feels like filmmakers have kind of forgotten how to choreograph and kind of pace a fight scene when it comes to a sword and sandals epic. And sadly, I had my hopes up with Ridley Scott, because if you go back and you watch his film from 2021, I believe, The Last Duel, which is a really underrated film, which sadly no one seemed to watch, and definitely his best one in the later stage of his career, if you ask me. And the action in that was really good, but especially the close quarters fighting. Every fight in that film felt really real and gritty, and it had that feeling that the first Gladiator had, where you could feel the mud and the blood through the screen. You really felt like you were there and you were immersed, and actions felt weighty, and every sword clang you could almost feel. And then sadly, for the most part, I think in this film, apart from a few moments here and there, a lot of the sword choreography, or I guess the sword play, feels either rushed or just pretty diluted. Everything happens so quickly and fights are kind of over just as they start. And one of the best things about the original Gladiator is that every fight in that film, every one-on-one that Maximus had, felt like its own little contained film with how it was paced and how actions were carried out throughout those. But overall, with all this being said, Scott is going for something a lot bigger than the original Gladiator over here. It's pretty epic in scale, so it's understandable that more difficulties and maybe limitations might come with it, and then you rely on things like CGI and maybe getting through things a bit quicker, because this is a fairly long film as well. And unfortunately, I think one of the reasons it feels quite long, and it's probably my biggest problem with the film, is the script. So this is written by David Scarpa, who also wrote Napoleon, his previous film. And I can really see what they were going for with this. It is slightly a retread of the original. There are certain things here and there. There are all these allusions to the original film, all these little Easter eggs that become more than Easter eggs. But there is a very good core idea where there should be quite a bit of political intrigue and a good amount of action. And for me, there just isn't enough of that political intrigue, and it isn't really explored enough. There is this interesting subplot which crops up about halfway through the film, but it kind of just gets sped through really quickly, and you don't feel the full weight of it when it should be a very weighty thing which has happened. Like, I really have to give Scarpa credit for trying with this, and as I say, the core idea is pretty good and makes sense for a sequel to Gladiator. It makes a lot more sense than what Nick Cave was trying to do, but there just isn't enough meat on its bones. It's pretty thin the way it's done here, and that's a real shame, because when they started to get into the more political elements, I was like, okay, this could be really interesting and we can go places with this, but it kind of doesn't, and that's a bit disappointing. Now, to speak for the cast, this was one of the biggest things behind the marketing for this film, because we have pretty much everyone's favorite actor at the moment, Paul Mescal, and then everyone else's favorite actor, Pedro Pascal, starring in this film. And I'll start with the good, and I'll kind of end with the bad over here. So if we look at Paul Mescal, he's someone who was obviously very committed to this role. He got pretty huge for it, but not actually superhero huge, which I kind of appreciate. He does really pull off the look of what I assume a gladiator would look like. Someone who's very much in shape, but they're not like bodybuilder huge. And I have to say, he's pretty good in this role. Unfortunately, some of the writing he has to deliver is a little bit hokey here and there, but in terms of the physicality, he absolutely nails that, and also the emotional side as well. And you could actually tell he's having a lot of fun with this. He's originally a theatre actor, and the script in this is actually pretty theatrical in terms of what kind of language is delivered over here, and I thought he was very convincing. And then if we look at Joseph Quinn, who, I'll be honest, I'm not really familiar with. I don't watch Stranger Things, and I haven't seen the latest Quiet Place film yet, but I do intend to watch it. But for what he has to do, he's very good at it in this film. It is kind of operatic and over the top at times, but he sells it very well. And then we have the one that I was actually pretty worried about after I saw the trailer, which is Denzel Washington, because it seemed like he was in a different film from that trailer. But then watching this, I actually thought to myself, no, this actually completely works for the character that he's playing. And I mean, it's Denzel. The guy is always going to pull off whatever script you put in front of him, and he really does it over here. There was some talk in early reviews saying that he's definitely a shoo-in for an Oscar nomination with this, and I don't think it's that good, but it is a very, very entertaining performance. And now we have to kind of get to the bad over here, but I'll start with probably the least bad here, and that's Pedro Pascal. And the problem here with Pedro Pascal is not his performance per se, but it's the character that he's got and the lines that he has to deliver, because his character of Acacius is just really, really thin. And this brings me back to the point I made earlier about the script not having enough meat on its bones, and his character is someone that really, really suffers for this, because it could have been really interesting if we got a bit more backstory on this guy and what kind of fuels him, but it's all very expositional, and as I said, just really, really paper thin. And it's a real shame, because on the physical side, he really pulls this off, and we do know Pedro Pascal is a great actor, but he just wasn't given enough to work with in this scenario. Then we have Fred Hetchinger, who plays the other twin of one of the emperors. I think his name is Korokala, and I've only seen Fred Hetchinger in the first season of The White Lotus, and I thought he was pretty good there for the character he had to play. But they have him doing this over-the-top, really wacky opposite twin to Joseph Quinn's Gator, and you can tell they really tried to channel the weirder side of Commodus that we sometimes saw in the original film, but just all the time in a character, and for me it really didn't work. And finally, I have to come to the most disappointing one over here, is Connie Nielsen. Now Connie Nielsen, she's been in plenty of films, she was very good in the original Gladiator film, but over here, her performance coupled with the lines that she has to deliver are just not convincing. She's not really portraying any emotion appropriately when she needs to, and some of the lines she has to deliver and when she has to deliver them are frankly quite abysmal, and I think it's a real shame for an actress like Connie Nielsen to be in this situation with such a poorly written character. And now look, as we get to this point in the review, it kind of sounds like I've crapped all over this film, and I don't mean to, I just want to be critical. But I will come down to the fact that I did enjoy myself for most of the time. I wasn't really bored, but I will say that the film was fairly long. Parts of it are really well put together, and other parts of it are pretty shoddily put together. But I think if you really liked the original and you just want something that's going to send you back to that world and is going to entertain you for about 2.5 hours, this is probably going to do the trick. If you go into this as a fan of the original and want something that's going to make you feel as fulfilled emotionally and even entertainment-wise, I think you're going to be a little bit disappointed. I'm probably somewhere in the middle. When I first saw the trailer for this film, I was kind of like, I don't know about this, especially with the weird soundtrack it had. Thankfully, none of the soundtrack from that trailer is actually in this film. But I'm sitting on this being a decent entry into Ridley Scott's late-stage career. I still think his best film that he's made in the later part of his life is The Last Duel, but Gladiator II is definitely miles better than something like House of Gucci or even Napoleon. I thought Napoleon was just boring, and parts of Gladiator II are actually really fun, and some of the battles are huge and grandiose, and there's a lot of blood, and if you're looking for that in a film about gladiators, then you're going to be happy. So with that, we've come to the end, and now I want to hear from all of you. Have you seen Gladiator II? Do you want to see Gladiator II? Are you excited? Are you not excited to see it? Please get involved in the comment section down below. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video, every little bit helps. As usual, you can tune into the Adlib podcast and you can find myself, Andrea, and Franco there every Monday live on YouTube at 7:30 p.m. in the UK or 8:30 p.m. in Malta. We talk about all the latest films we've been watching and the news and stuff like that. It's all live streamed, you can get involved in the comments over there, and it's just all around a good time. For upcoming films that I will be going to see, I don't know if I'll get a chance to go and see Wicked because I'm actually going to be away next weekend, but I'm very much looking forward to Conclave. That comes out on the 29th, and that will probably be the next film I review, so you can look out for that. But until then, always remember strength and honor. Thank you for watching.